Instead of having a certain group of people being called the slaves, take a part of everyone's labor. Before, the slaves were taxed at around 90%, or whatever could be taken from them and would still keep them alive. This was for projects specifically designed to benefit the slave master, and it was openly stated as such. How the system was maintained was clearly a mixture of the ideological and the marginal state, as usual. Today, more fraud has to be used. Instead of having a group of people called the slaves, everyone is partially enslaved. The extent to which they are taxed is the extent to which others have been able to commandeer their labor. 40%, then the area called the United States is 40% enslaved in purely economic terms. Now with these taxes, the slave masters don't build pyramids, though they do build monuments to presidents. Primarily the taxes are spent on projects ostensibly for the benefit of the taxpayers. There is a great deal of graft, and there is a long and sordid history of the state being used to benefit those who can lobby the best, and bureaucrats build up their empires on the backs of whoever they can manage to tax or convince a mob rush against. But corruption is really a secondary problem. The main issue is that the state is slavery. If you look at how the state and taxes operate, it is essentially slavery. You are born into it. You don't get to choose what state you are in. You don't sign a contract agreeing to pay taxes to this state. And you are not able to use land that the state claims it owns, even though it has not acquired ownership of that land in the same way any private citizen would claim ownership, like the homesteading principle. The state prevents productive citizens from leaving for other plantation states. For the longest time in the U.S., there were no restrictions on leaving because nobody wanted to leave. But as the taxes were turned up and the industries were cartelized, the more productive citizens started looking for places where they could pursue their dreams unhampered by the state. The result has been the expatriation tax, a barrier to exit. The state, as it becomes more tyrannical, needs to prevent its productive members from leaving, which is happening in the United States now. What your taxes go to, that is, what your expropriated labor goes to, is not in your control. This is partially ameliorated through democracy, but of course we all have first-hand knowledge of just how easy democracy is to control, and even if direct democracy were achieved, you would simply be a slave to the majority. Sure, your vote has some impact, but in a large population this is virtually worthless, and so effectively whatever matters are voted on in a democratic state, that is the extent to which you are enslaved. Whenever someone says, only the state can do X because there is no mechanism in the free market to do X, they're saying that only the employment of slave labor can solve whatever problem they are talking about. And what's more is that instead of looking for a way to not employ something as ghastly as slave labor, they look for excuses to employ it and dismiss anti-slavery, that is, anarchist arguments out of hand. And so I think calling the state slavery is a way to put forward a quick point. And if the statist requests clarification, then the anarchist can do that.